So the last 12 months have been very different for many of us, with both the challenge of coronavirus and then finishing the year with Brexit. But for many, these challenges have also been opportunities to look at different working systems or methods, and also to explore the opportunities that have come along. Over the next 2 weeks, we will hear from speakers on a range of different subjects, all of which will have an impact on UK dairy farming in one form or another. There will also be 30 new product launches taking place during the time. The industry faces challenges around the environment and the implications of climate change, along with the implication for the reputation of the industry. These challenges are not going to go away, and to make the most of the ELM scheme for both the environment and the farm, and to comply with the legislation that's likely to come for the Clean Air Strategy, will require both a change of mindset and action from all involved with the industry. These changes will need to be made collectively by all farming organisations working together to meet them and to show our customers the true value UK agriculture has in producing nutritious, wholesome food in a world-leading and sustainable manner. RABDF is determined to help lead this for you. I'd like to thank the team at the RABDF for the tremendous work they've done in putting the programme together for the next 2 weeks, and also to our sponsors, without whom this wouldn't be possible. I hope you enjoyed the events over the next 2 weeks, and we would welcome any feedback that you might have. Victoria Prentice, the Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for Farming, Fisheries and Food, had hoped to join us today, but unfortunately, due to business in the House of Commons, this is no longer possible. But she has recorded the following opening address for us.
Hello, I'm really sorry I can't be with you today, but very pleased that you asked me to give a speech online. I hope to meet you all soon. It's clearly been a very challenging year for us all, and in particular for the dairy sector, but I'm enormously grateful to all of you who've worked so hard to keep things going. I appreciate how stressful the situation continues to be, particularly in the light of recent deaths of workers at a dairy plant. I cannot thank you all enough for the work that you're doing. I think the government and industry have worked together well during the pandemic. We temporarily relaxed competition law and then worked collaboratively to make it easier for processors to come together to maximise production, processing and storage. And the Milk Your Moments promotion campaign helped drive an increase in consumption, which was really helpful. Alongside the response to the pandemic, some major milestones have passed, including the passage into law of our Agriculture Act and the start of the new transitional period for agriculture. We're doing away with the old Common Agricultural Policy, removing the old style top-down rules and draconian penalties, and replacing it with a system that will pay our farmers and landowners in a fairer way, which I hope will lead to higher productivity, greater public benefit and better environmental outcomes. We were the first major economy to bring the net zero target into law, and this is just the beginning. We'll now set our own climate and energy policies based on ambitious domestic and international climate objectives and lead the world in transition to a net zero future. The trade deal with the EU provides producers in our country with the certainty they need to continue to trade with Europe. It avoids the imposition of tariffs and quotas, which would have made life very difficult for us all. This is the first such agreement that the EU has reached with zero tariffs and zero quotas. It means that we can now start to develop a new relationship with our trading partners in Europe. I'm sure that the agreement will mean that we are able to trade with our largest market, as well as pursue new opportunities elsewhere. Looking to the future, our aim is to help the dairy sector to produce more, to sell more, and to export more of our great food. We've got a good reputation for quality based on high animal welfare standards and strong environmental protection. This is a great basis for selling our products both at home and abroad. As well as responding to the pandemic, it's fair to say that we have another enormous long-term challenge ahead of us, which is to deal with environmental changes. But this is another opportunity for collaboration between government and industry. And as the UK's largest agricultural sector, dairy has a really important part to play in this. Achieving net zero by 2050 is a priority for the government. We recognise that livestock and dairy contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, but we also very much appreciate the sector's own ambitious commitments in this respect. The Pioneering Dairy Roadmap provides a great example of a whole supply chain approach to tackling environmental change, and we also have good examples of the UK leading the way. For instance, a state-of-the-art milk processing facility in Aylesbury was the first in the world designed to be carbon net zero. We're now producing 9% more milk than we were in the year 2000, with 23% fewer cows. We know that while food choices can have an impact on greenhouse gas emissions, but we also know that well-managed livestock produce environmental benefits, such as supporting biodiversity, protecting the character of the countryside we love, and of course generating important income for rural communities. We're developing a range of measures through the Ag Act, the National Food Strategy and the 25-year Environment Plan, with the aim of helping farmers to optimise sustainable food production and to reduce emissions from agriculture. The cornerstone of our new agricultural policy is our Environmental Land Management Scheme. This will introduce a new approach to paying for public goods with more choice and control for farmers, a greater focus on outcomes, and less bureaucracy and prescription that was so much a part of the EU schemes. One of the public goods incentivised by the scheme will be mitigation and adaptation to climate change. Peatland restoration is one example of where we can protect the existing carbon store and reduce emissions. Our new approach will be made up of 3 component parts, which taken together will, we hope, achieve the outcomes we want. So the sustainable farming incentive will apply to farmers, paying them for actions they take to manage their land in an environmentally sustainable way. Local nature recovery will pay for actions that support local nature recovery and deliver on environmental priorities, making sure the right things are in the right places. Landscape recovery will support the delivery of landscape and ecosystem recovery through long-term land use change projects. The national pilot will start in 2021. Initially, this will focus on piloting the sustainable farming incentive. We're hoping to have as many as 5,500 farmers involved in the course of this year in that pilot. Turning now to cleaner air. Agriculture is the dominant source of ammonia emissions, with the sector accounting for about 87% of total UK emissions, with 24% coming from dairy cattle. The government has made legally binding commitments to reduce ammonia emissions by 8% by 2020 and by 16% by 2030. The Clean Air Strategy sets out the action government will take to do these reductions in line with our clean air targets. This includes requiring and supporting farmers to invest in their infrastructure and equipment that will help to reduce emissions. Unlike the pig and poultry sectors, ammonia emissions from dairy and intensive beef farming are not currently regulated. Given the contribution to ammonia emissions, we are planning to extend environmental permitting to these sectors. The EA will work with you to develop best available technique documents for limiting pollutions from the sectors. I know, of course, there is a lot of industry concern about this, but permitting is regarded positively by many in the pig and poultry industries. And it does provide flexibility and can be a spur for innovation. Wherever possible, we want to design a regulatory approach which adopts alternative, proven and verifiable techniques for reducing emissions. So we want to work with you on this. In terms of productivity grants, which is very much part of working together, from the autumn of this year, we'll open the Farming Investment Fund, which provides grants to farmers, foresters and growers so that they can invest in the equipment and technology that they need to help their businesses to prosper. This is similar to the current Countryside Productivity Scheme. Grants will be offered for a proportion of the total cost of the investment, and there'll be opportunities to bid for smaller investments. There are, of course, other ways in which we can help the sector to meet the challenges on the environment. For instance, gene editing has the ability to harness genetic resources to help us all adapt to the challenges of climate change and to increase our productivity. We very much want you to be part of these conversations and look forward to a wide response to our recently launched consultation in this area. Finally, but not least, dairy contracts. Last year, we consulted on exploring contractual relationships in the dairy industry, and I'd like to thank all of you who contributed to that consultation. We got over 800 responses, and I know that many of you who responded will be watching today. We've conducted an analysis of the responses, and I'm delighted to confirm the publication of summary responses earlier today. We're now working with the devolved governments to develop a statutory code of conduct. I think this will be a really positive step going forward. So, a lot to talk about in the sector at the moment. We're entering a period of significant change for British agriculture generally, but also for dairy specifically. We've seen over the course of this last horrific year that the dairy sector can be very resilient and can change quickly and is able to rise to the challenges that has been thrown at it. So I wish you well in the important discussions you're going to have during this conference. I genuinely wish I were with you, and I would love to be making this speech and answering your questions in person. But unfortunately, I have business in the House of Commons this morning, the Animal Welfare Sentencing Bill, which means that I can't be. But I hope you have a really good day.
Thank you, Victoria, for that message. Now, moving on to the panel debate that we're going to be having this morning, and the title for the debate is The State of the Nation, Challenges and Opportunities Facing Dairy Farming. So in Victoria's absence, Tim Morden has very kindly joined us as Deputy Director of DEFRA. And what I'd like to do is go through the panel members and just ask them to give us a few minutes of their thoughts on the state of the nation, the challenges and opportunities facing dairy farming. And I'd like to kick that off, please, with Tim.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Peter. And I'm really pleased to be with you. And I'm so impressed that we've got over 200 participants with us today. I'm also quite glad that I seem to know quite a lot of people, certainly everyone on the panel, but quite a few people on the call as well, which is great. So I'm Tim Morden, and I'm, as you say, Peter, from the agri-food chain bit of DEFRA. And I was talking to Victoria Prentice about something completely different yesterday, and she did ask me to apologise in person for not being able to be with you today. But as she said, and you said, she's had to give the opening address at the Animal Welfare Sentencing Bill, and she didn't have any choice. But hopefully, she said that if another opportunity comes, then she'd love to come along. So you asked me to say something about the challenges and opportunities, and I think it's important that it is challenges and opportunities, because my view of the dairy industry is that it has plenty of both, and it, through many of the challenges, the opportunities arise. So you just asked me to speak for 2 or 3 minutes. I'll just mention a few of the things that spring to my mind. I don't want to repeat everything that's already been said about how awful last year was, and obviously some of that's continuing into this year. But we know that it was just a horrendous year last year for all of the all dairy sectors, and dairy had it particularly hard because of the amount of milk that got taken off the hospitality sector. But it was, I think a lot of us in DEFRA weren't terribly surprised that with in typical fashion the sector responded positively, showed tremendous resilience, showed what fantastic sector we have, and the fact that the supermarket shelves didn't run dry of milk. We were still happy. We were still able to purchase milk was tremendous. So I think that's the first thing. Then the second one has to be the environment. We know that we have challenging net zero targets, and we know that farming has to do its bit because of the greenhouse gas emissions. But I think the dairy sector has been already making progress in this area, and I've been doing a version of this job for a number of years, and I can remember some years ago the launch of the dairy sector's dairy roadmap, which was several years ago, and it just shows how in many ways the dairy sector was ahead of its time in looking at how it can reduce its emissions and contribute towards net zero. That's before net zero became common vernacular. So that's clearly an area of challenge, but one where hopefully some opportunities will arise. And in the time I've been dealing with agriculture in DEFRA, price volatility has been a common feature of the dairy sector. Over the past few years, I've lived through at least 2 dairy crises, which have been really difficult. We know we've lost a lot of dairy farmers, really tough, and we've always struggled to come up with really clear solutions about how we can address that. And it's not a UK issue; it's a global issue in many respects. The cyclical nature of the dairy sector. But I hope that as we move to a new agricultural regime, that volatility will be at least partly offset by improved productivity and competitiveness, which is probably the best way of attacking volatility in some ways. Then I just wanted to pick up on what Victoria mentioned about contracts. Again, this is something that has been brewing for a long time. We had a voluntary code of conduct a few years ago, which didn't have universal take up. We did the consultation, and you'll have seen today, hopefully, I'm sure you're all avid followers of gov.uk, so you'll see on there the summary of responses to that consultation, and I'm sure that we can have a bit of a discussion about that later on. Given the time limits, Peter, I'll just mention one other thing, which is a little bit sensitive, but I have 2 daughters. They're both at university, and whilst they're not representative of the British consumer at large, I know that they have concerns about dairy consumption, the industry. Despite my best efforts, they like oat milk, and there's a challenge there for the industry, which can't be denied. But equally, given the nature of your industry, I'm sure there's lots of ways it will adapt, rise to that challenge, and continue to flourish. So I'll stop there, Peter, but thanks very much for just giving me the opportunity to mention a few themes.
Thank you, Tim. I'd like to bring in next, please, Nicholas Sapphire, Chair of AHDB. Nicholas.
Thanks, Peter. I mean, as you said, just a few minutes to put some pointers up for maybe further questions and discussions. I would just say your point at the beginning about collaboration and working together, I think we have seen one of the, I guess, the benefits of COVID-19 is exactly that. And I think that the industry did come together in terms of not only looking at what the reality was with the close down of hospitality, but also the promotions and the other things that really saw us pretty much through what could have been a torrid time compared with what happened, for example, in Europe and what happened in America. But let me just put a few pointers up. First of all, I'm optimistic. I am optimistic, despite all of these issues around environment and alternative milks or alternatives that aren't milk. But let me just give a few pointers, maybe to challenge whether my optimism is worth considering. First of all, I would return to the individual farm level. There is still an enormous difference between top quartile performance and bottom quartile performance in this industry. I mean, we did some survey work in 2018, which is still valid, which showed that the average herd size in the UK, there was about £100,000 difference in terms of ability to generate revenues and profits. And that's not about size, that's about the way in which businesses are run, businesses are managed. It also now is very much about whether you're aligned or not aligned in the supply chain. But it's very much about how you manage the farm. And it's quite interesting during COVID-19 that we moved from obviously from field events for our 22 monitor and strategy farms, which I hope will be 28 in dairy by the end of this year. But we moved very much online, and incredibly, we've been seeing over 1,000 people at each event, either in real time or in catch up, when previously you would have seen 100 to 150 maximum. So 24,500 people on our webinars so far. And I think that signals a really big change. But I would say farm performance, benchmarking, all of those issues, big questions for the future. I'd say the supply chain, go back to your collaboration, we've got to engage more with the supply chain. We did it in COVID-19 in terms of sharing information, given that the Competition Authority relaxed some of the rules, but we are still hooked into this belief for many people that liquid milk is the top of the market, and it isn't. It isn't for a whole lot of reasons. We've got to be better innovators. We've got to look at markets in a different way. If I take exports, here we are, I mean, your subject, Peter, cheese. We're number 11 in the world export market, close behind Belarus. I mean, if you look at our cheese exports at $0.9 billion, that is comparing France, Germany, Holland at between 3.5 billion and 4.5 billion, so 4 times more than us. And why do exports matter? Firstly, because actually they do actually, by and large, produce higher returns, but also they're a benchmark to keep the home market honest. And if I look at, for example, Kerrygold, #2 butter brand in the States, 33,000 tons a year, an American market which is desperate for more butter fats. So we've got a lot of opportunity around exports. And then if you come to working together in Tim's point about alternatives to dairy, I think I'm really encouraged by the work that we've done together over the last 18 months in 3 promotions. Milk Your Moments was very much during COVID-19, but take the Eat Balance program that's just started, which is a collaboration between dairy, beef, lamb, and pork. And that's just gone live. It's been in the press, Daily Mail, it's been on television, it's been in The Guardian, and it's had a lot of cover, and the results are real. So I think we can take the fight back into the marketplace, redress the balance in terms of information. So lots of challenges, of course, but I think there's lots of reasons to be optimistic if we can actually get ourselves together in terms of collaboration and doing something about improving farm performance and also looking at market opportunities.
Thank you, Nicholas. That's really good, and some really interesting and thought-provoking comments in there. I'd next like to bring in Oliver McIntyre. Oliver is the National Agricultural Strategy Director for Barclays. Oliver.
Thank you, Peter. Morning, everyone, and good morning to Tim and Nick. I'm going to be mercifully quick, Mr. Chairman, because I think Tim and Nicholas have already said exactly what I was going to say. For me, the opportunities are just the challenges too. So as an industry, probably that net zero target, it is going to be a challenge. We know that, we're not naive, but we've got to remember a few points with that. I think should we get there, and some of the survey work we've done in the last 6 months says that 80% of farmers think we'll get there by 2035. You know, if we can get there, and we can get there quickly and productively, and in a way that can be audited and seen, I think that's a huge opportunity for marketing UK produce, you know, not just in the UK, but around the globe. And we've got to remember that we are, I still rack my brains, we are the only industry that, yes, we're emitters, as even though we're all sitting at home, we're all emitters of carbon as we're even just online. But we're also the only industry I can think of that can actually sequestrate carbon and manage greenhouse gas. So I think that's a huge positive. On an individual farm basis, I'm going to touch on something Nick said, and I just did a bit of sort of maths, Nick, before this started. I didn't bother because you quoted the exact figure for me. You know, that difference between top 25% and bottom 25%, 10.5 pence per litre, average size dairy farm on an average yield is 1 million litres. That's 105 grand. You know, we've got BPS contracting. We've got to change it to ELMS and the way we're going to look at environmental schemes and how we're going to get paid. £105,000 difference between bottom and top. That's the biggest opportunity for me on an on-farm level. I suppose as the banker, you know, we should look at the sort of debt levels in the industry. And you know, 1/3 of dairy farms do have a debt level above £400,000. If you start looking at average net worth in the Farm Business Survey, you know, you're talking owner occupied at 1.5 million. That to me as a banker, providing it's sustainable, repayable debt, means there's an awful lot of asset base there to leverage as farmers across dairy and across the whole of UK will need to invest in the coming 6 to 8 years to adapt and change to what's coming down the track to us.
Thank you, Oliver. That's again some good points there, and some I'm sure we'll pick up on in questions shortly. Coming on now to Michael Oakes, Chairman of the Dairy Board for the NFU. Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. A lot of the things I was going to mention have already been covered, so I'll be quite quick. 2 big announcements today, I think, that the Minister, the Farming Minister mentioned. Obviously, the contracts announcement. We're delighted we've got to this point. Actually, it's not really about contracts, it's about relationships within the supply chain going forward and transparency and fairness. It's something we've spoken about on many occasions, and we hope that the whole industry will come together to work with DEFRA to make sure that we can pull something together that puts the whole industry in a much better place. We know there are parts of the industry where processors are extremely under pressure as well. As Nick alluded to earlier, the liquid market was always perceived to be the jewel in the crown not too many years ago, yet processors are really struggling in that market at the moment. So we need to use this opportunity to sort of rebalance the industry and put ourselves in a much better place to take advantage of potentially the opportunities that will come out of Brexit. And Nick also alluded to that quite often exports have a higher margin than servicing retailers, and that I know you've spoken to me about that in the past, Peter, with your own exports. So I think, going forward, we've got to, make the best of that and work together as an industry. Permitting, I think, was the other big announcement, I would say, that the Minister announced. Now, it's something within the Clean Air Strategy DEFRA have been talking about for a long, long time. Some of us went out with the Clean Air team to Holland a few years ago, where they have a very similar system that's already in existence for dairy. The one thing we did see and notice was that they'd actually put a massive amount of cost, especially on new builds and potentially retrospectively onto dairy farms out there at a scale we've never seen in the UK. But actually they weren't even sure that they'd actually got the desired outcomes they needed. So I think we need to work with DEFRA and together to make sure that if they are going to permit dairy farms and large beef farms, which it looks like that's going to happen, that they do understand the diversity of the dairy industry. It's not quite the same as the pig and poultry industry. That's much more of a standard system. We have lots of different systems. And so far, the detail we've got out of DEFRA has been very, very light on how they're going to actually cope with the diversity of the dairy sector. So actually, I'm not convinced permitting will actually deliver for the dairy sector and get the outcomes that DEFRA's looking for. We are signed up. The roadmap's been mentioned twice today. We are also signed up, along with AHDB, and Dairy UK to the Dairy Sustainability Framework. And I think that's something we should be focusing on and working forward. We can measure ourselves against our competitor countries throughout the world. Many countries are signed up to that, and we can actually show that, you know, we are world class and world leading, and we're aiming for net zero and reducing ammonia emissions without actually tying our farmers' hands behind their back, potentially. Brexit and trade, obviously, that will bring opportunities, but at this moment in time, there's issues with export health certificates. We're getting increasingly notified about teething problems, but if you're actually trying to export at this moment in time, it feels much more than a teething problem. And potentially there's product not being exported that would be. There's hauliers reluctant to actually, you know, go out of the country. So there's certainly quite a lot of friction, but we do need to work with DEFRA and make sure that they're aware of that. On exports, the government needs to help with market access ultimately in the long term. It's not all about tariffs. Look how Bord Bia works in Ireland. I think we can learn a lot from our competitors. And actually we need to work with the industry and government to make sure we get access to those opportunities that we were promised under the Brexit deal. Promotion and marketing, Nick's already spoken about to a certain degree. January, we're usually under attack from Veganuary. Well, that's how it feels if you're out there milking the cows in the morning and you're listening to the radio or the TV or looking at social media. We are actually in a much better place now with promotion. Nick spoke about that. I think, you know, ASDB are much more fleet of foot, much more relevant, and actually working with the industry and government to address some of the issues. And we need to see more of that going forward. You know, we also as farmers need to work hard to correct the misinformation, because quite often there's a lot of misinformation out there about what we actually get up to on farm. And I know the NFU published a document called Rethinking Ruminants last year, just before lockdown actually, but that is still available for any farmer that wants it to use to put across the case. And it's all you know, you can rely on the facts that are in there. We also need to be much more savvy. Sometimes, you know, tackling these issues head on is a bit like putting petrol on the fire. So we need to be cuter in the way that we do that, and not give some of the anti-dairy people more publicity just because we're angry and frustrated. But also I think there's things we can learn from some of the alternatives that are out there, some of the dairy alternatives. You know, I think they are very savvy in their marketing, and they also show a level of innovation in their product development that we perhaps haven't seen in the UK dairy industry for quite a long time. So I think, you know, we can tend to look at, you know, how they are getting shelf space and what it is they're doing, and we could learn from that and tackle them head on. We also have to work quickly, I think, on reputational risk issues. The bull calf issue may come up in discussion, in questions. But you know, we've got to keep our own house in order and make sure that we are doing the right things or on the way to actually getting better. I'm nearly there, I think. Quickly, there's lots and lots of consultations out at this moment in time. I've probably never seen so many which would affect our farmers. You know, we've got urea, we've got animal transport regs, AHDBs going out with the consultation at the moment, red tractor, TB and more. What I would just quickly like to say on TB, because if you're in a TB area, this really does matter. You know, we've seen real success in reducing the incidences of TB in cool zones, and the government's announcement last week to sort of stop giving new licenses from next year, in effect, to cool zones is almost the same as saying tomorrow that, well, we're vaccinating lots of people against COVID-19, we're going to actually, you know, go back to normal. That would be equally as stupid, I think, as potentially throwing out the baby with the bathwater before we've actually got a solution to TB through vaccination, whilst we know that the calls work. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Okay, so we've covered a lot of subjects there between everybody, and I think what I'd like to do is kick off with dairy contracts. And just ask the panel, we've been in a situation where there was a voluntary code that didn't work as well as was hoped. And so we're now moving into the next stage, which is a more prescribed situation. How is that going to affect the farmer, and will it actually deliver proper benefits to milk producers and processors, or will we see the imposition of some conditions that actually make the relationship slightly more challenging than maybe we would like. So I'll kick that one off with Michael then.
Oh, I think that's why, you know, we welcome, well, you know, we've been talking along with yourselves to processors, to the industry for years now on this, to build on the voluntary code, which did have some positives. We know that the holy grail for most processors is buyer's discretion. You know, I would love the opportunity within my farming business to be able to turn around to my suppliers and say, well, actually, I'm having a tough time at the minute. I'm going to actually pay you less than you thought you were going to get. Maybe I'll give them a month's notice, maybe not. You know, we've got to find a better way. You know, I know you, Peter, within your business, I've spoken to you about it. You have a good working relationship with your farmers where, you know, you work together to get through the highs and the lows. And there are businesses out there doing that. We need to build on the positives. But we are committed to sit down with the industry, with Dairy UK and with the processors to find a solution that works for the industry so that we get away from this us and them relationship, which does exist between some farmers and their milk buyers, to try and take the industry forward. But I mean, you know, we are very aware that we need to make sure that DEFRA get this right so that we have, you know, a profitable processing industry, but also a profitable and sustainable primary producer industry as well at dairy level.
Thanks, Michael. Tim, your thoughts?
Yep. Well, thanks very much, Michael. I mean, and I enjoyed reading your NFU news release this morning, press release, which was very positive, which is always nice to see. I think you've covered it mainly, Michael. I mean, this has been going on for some time, and you know, DEFRA ministers have come under severe pressure and have been constantly told for a number of years that margins, profits across the supply chain in dairy are not evenly and equally distributed and fairly distributed. That's what it comes down to. I think you're absolutely right when in your introduction, when you said that it's not so much about contracts, it's more about relationships. And of course, whenever you can't legislate, it's very difficult to legislate for that. But you know, we've been treading a careful path here because you know, on the producer side, we want to make sure that there's more transparency, there's more clarity about what contracts are. We want to make, you know, the best in class the norm, if you like. That's what we're aiming for here. Lots of farmers have said, well, you know, can we just have some legislation that sets the price, please? And you know, some even went as far as saying, do you remember the Milk Marketing Board? That was a jolly good idea. Can we have that back, please? And I think there was a good reason why we left the Milk Marketing Board some time ago, and we were not lurching back to that, nor are we determining the price. But we want to you know, identify the best features of relationships, contracts, the key elements, and make those the norm. Equally, from the producer side, the dairy side, you've got to understand it from their perspective. They were nervous about additional costs, time to adapt. So, you know, we're looking at 2-year lead-in time and things like that. And there's still a bit of detail to be sorted out, and we want to continue talking to everyone in the industry, you know, about how we take this forward and turn it into legislation. But I think it's the right way forward, and so far I think we're getting the balance right, and I'm confident that it will make a significant difference and will, you know, result in that kind of better relationship that Michael spoke about.
Thanks, Tim. Nicholas, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that one, but one of the questions we've got coming in is the New Zealand model, where they seem to be fairly successful with their dairy operations over there. Is that a contract model we should be learning from and working with potentially?
Okay. Can I move away from? I mean, it's to do with the contract, all right, Peter? So don't. But can I move away from a direct comment on the contract? Because I don't. AHDB does not have a position on this. It shouldn't have a position on it. It's not an AHDB issue. Well, it is an issue, but it's not an AHDB area. But can I make a slightly wider comment? Because I think that starting off with Michael's point about buyers' discretion is what buyers want, and I think that's true. And Tim's point about redistribution of margins. Let me just make this wider point. The reality is that when I came into this industry, the percentage of disposable income we spent on food was 27%. Now, that's a long time ago. And today it's 11, 12%. And the answer is that food is very, very cheap. And you will not get a change in that from a policy point of view, because politicians are not going to vote for more expensive food. And we do have a food poverty problem as well. But what it does mean is that when you come to redistribution of margin, there isn't very much margin anywhere in the supply chain that is actually redistributable. So if you go back to the late 1990s, retailers had thumping great margins. They don't today. If you look at the supply chain, Michael's already talked about the bottlers. I've talked about the bottlers. Most of the supply chain aren't making thumping great margins. So I think you come back, and this comes back to New Zealand. I think you come back to the issue. Yes, a contract's important, but a contract is only important in the sense that it sets the ring for better collaboration. And I think at the end of the day, you'll only break out of this if we have better collaboration right up and down. So it's about alignment. It's about producers having choosing who they want to work with, and supply chain choosing who they want to work with. It's about exports to keep the home market honest. It's about all of those things that we have to get into. And then just to pick up, if I may, just one thing about New Zealand. When I was on the board of Dairy Crest a long time ago, we sent a team out to New Zealand to see why, in fact, they were able to get into world markets at prices that we couldn't. And I remember, and it was a long time ago, I remember one little feature that stuck in my mind. All of the valves on the farm tanks matched all the valves on the collection vehicles, matched all the valves on the reception in terms of silos, and they were saving 15 minutes per collection compared with us. Now, I know that's beginning to happen here, but that's 30 years ago. And I think that it is about the whole supply chain working together. It is about contracts being a base, but it's about actually taking out all of the unnecessary costs. It's about driving innovation and opportunity. And that's really why contracts are only just a starting point. That's a bit of a ramble, but I hope you get the message.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think there's some interesting points to look at there. Oliver, Jim Dickinson's been on, and he's asked the question, looking at Australia. So we're looking in the Southern Hemisphere for some inspiration here. Australia has imposed annual milk pricing and promotion cost plus contracts, but it's led to a position of exports not being sustainable and farms are closing. How do we learn from those sorts of models to ensure that UK agriculture is still profitable and we can still keep milk production and good food production going?
Yeah, it's a good example. I said we do seem to be focusing on the Southern Hemisphere, Peter, isn't it? Perhaps it's the lack of travel we can all currently do at the minute. We can look at these models around the world. Nick's given a good example there of New Zealand. I just think I could take you back to those benchmarking figures of AHDB. We can look externally, no matter what the industry is. I still regard myself as a farmer of sorts. You can look externally and look for all that help coming in, and fixed price contracts and cost plus contracts and all the rest of it. But actually, a huge amount of control happens beyond the farm gate, in the cow sheds, in the parlour, and more importantly these days, obviously in the farm office. And I think for me, it sounds an awful thing to say, but if I was sitting there as a dairy farmer and 4 neighbours were all less efficient than I was at producing, then that would make me very happy. All my background is the pig industry, and where you can be more efficient than your competitor farmers, that gives you a better chance of survival in times that are volatile. That might not be the answer that people are looking for, but I do think there's an awful lot that can go on beyond the farm gate at the moment that would ensure that we have contracts. I didn't really touch on them because I think the other 3 panelists really sort of nailed that topic. But that's all about communication. Some of the farms I go on in more usual times usually have a very good working relationship with their milk processor. Communication, transparency of supply chain, and there are, from what I see, faults on both sides clearly. But I think for me, cost plus contracts start to put almost a false floor in the market. And obviously it's a project they've tried in Australia and doesn't look like it's worked, does it?
Okay, thank you for that, Oliver. I think there's some some great points on that, and it's something that we need to keep mindful of and learn the lessons from other countries when we're working on it. We've got a few questions around brands and that sort of stuff, which I'll quickly throw to the panel before we move on to a different topic. We've got one comment from Claire Dooley saying that she's a small business owner, but during the pandemic, branded milk has been delivered direct to the door with personalisation of milk cartons and supporting local supply, which is great. So really going, I guess, to Nicholas first, the next question from Tom Levitt came is, do you think AHDB should be doing more to support innovation and brand development in the dairy sector? And is spending large amounts of money on telling people milk is great without sufficient proof actually adding value to the dairy producer?
Okay, let's start with the question and then come back to the previous point about local. First of all, I think that just promoting milk without any form of justification in terms of reputational support or evidence, yeah, that's a pretty much a waste of money. And if you look at the Eat Balanced campaign, I think that there were lots of bits of information we looked at and thought about including, but look at the B12 claim, which I think is the one that's getting up the nose of the vegans at the moment, who actually are vulnerable to that one. And it's just picking up a highlight of where animal protein does have a real role to play in a balanced diet. So I think promotions like that are really very important. And it's not an attack on the vegans, because if vegans are 2% of the population, taking Michael's point, there's no point in having a head-to-head. But what is important is the large number of people, particularly young people, who are questioning whether it is okay to eat animal protein and including milk. And I think the more we can actually show them that it's part of a balanced diet, then I think that we are actually beginning to carve out a position in the marketplace that is sustainable. And then we've got to build on that in terms of reputation and consistency and moving towards reduction in greenhouse gases and all those other things. So yes, I am not a generic communicator, but I do believe that there is evidence and there is good information that we've got to carry to consumers. That's the first point. Coming back to the previous point about local brands, I think that's really interesting. The received wisdom is that this is a world, not just in dairy, but across agriculture, where as the challenges become greater, the large will prevail and the small will go to the wall. And history says that's not true. History tells us that in agriculture, well-run farms, particularly where there are animals involved, can be large or small, and scale does not actually automatically deliver profitability. And I think that there is a really interesting area here about local, and dairy is a good example. Local milk rounds, farm gate dispensers, all of those things are becoming much more significantly opportunities than we've had in the past. And I can see a future in which there will be a complete fragmentation in the way in which dairy is sold. I mean, before lockdown, I was in Austria, and I was looking at, I was out in the country, and I was looking at an automatic dispenser on a farm drive, which had a full range of dairy products, which the locals could come and buy from the dispenser. And just put their money in, or the credit card or whatever. Those things are going to be very, very big opportunities for those in the right place. It'll be the next generation of farm shops. It'll be all of those things. So I think we're into a really exciting time for marketing. And going back to something else you said, Peter, I think it is critical that collaboration right across the industry, not just on producer, not just levy payer, but also in terms of the supply chain, including government, who actually participated in the Milky Moments campaign. All of those things are really significant as we move forward, but it's got to be evidence-based.
Thank you, Nicholas. Michael, do you want to just quickly comment on that, and then we'll move on to a different topic?
Yeah, no, I'd already spoken about innovation, and if you look at the major investments in the UK dairy industry over the last few years, they've all been in very efficient liquid milk processing, but then take a walk down the dairy aisle and look at the innovative dairy products in your local retailer, and most of those and the added value products are quite often imported. And I think we've got to change that, and maybe Brexit will create that opportunity, and maybe some more investment within the UK in innovation and in added value products. I mean, I'm old enough to remember walking down the bread aisle when there was thick, thin, and medium, and that was your selection and your choice. Now you walk down the bread aisle, and it's as long as a retail store, and it's all still bread, but there's so many added value products, with added things and things taken away. I was lucky enough last year to go to Korea and Turkey with the World Dairy Summit, and you walk down their dairy aisles, and there's dairy there for every stage of your life. It's tailored products for infants, for every stage. There's something tailored, added value, and it's promoted, and actually consumers are looking for it and buying it. We just haven't really tapped into that yet. It's starting to happen. We are getting some products there now, but quite often they're not produced in the UK and they don't contain British milk. And I think we've got to actually work together to take that opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Okay, we're going to move on now to clean air and the environment, and question that's come in from Paul Flanagan. Who do the panel feel have the most influence on farmers reducing their environmental impact? Consumers, funders and banks, or policymakers? So, Tim, let's kick off with yourself on that one, and then we'll come to Oliver.
Well, the easy answer to that is probably a blend of all three, but ultimately it's we're all consumers. We're all after the same thing, which is improved environment, net zero, and clean air. So, sometimes parts of agriculture don't always listen to the consumer. But the messages are coming through very clearly at the moment, aren't they? And we've already touched on those in relation to, Veganuary and so on. I would say everyone has a part to play. I'm sure Oliver would say that the bankers probably have the most influence in all this. But I would say ultimately it's going to be consumer driven. If you look at all the big changes in policies that have happened in recent years, where the zeitgeist has really shifted, and I suppose the obvious one that springs to mind is Blue Planet 2 and plastic bags. It's been because of that the time is right for that big consumer change of demand, and so that would be my answer.
Okay, thank you, Oliver.
Yeah, I'll surprise you now, Tim. I'm not sure banks would be the biggest influence in the current environment we're in. I think consumers first and foremost, because those consumers out there that seem that are empowered through their income levels to make those choices on what food they do or don't buy. And we must remember there is a whole section, never mind globally, but in the UK, who don't have that sort of empowerment within their disposable income, as Nick's already touched on. But those that do will make their choices, and that will shape the future of the industry. That's why I believe that, the journey to net zero is something we're incredibly focused on. I think probably 80%, possibly 90% of the calls that I do at the minute, it's one of the main topics on the agenda. Will there come a time where banks have to account for, the money they're lending or the deposits they're holding, and therefore the sort of carbon footprint of those businesses? Potentially, yes. And at which point, Tim, you'd be right, because, huge carbon emitters may get to a point in 20, 30 years' time where banks don't want to be responsible for facilitating that business. That sort of thing is so far down the line compared to consumer choice at the minute. And I think for me, this is something that the whole industry, dairy and livestock especially, but the whole industry needs to, as Michael said, not meet head on, but we need to be incredibly more vocal about the positive things we do as an industry already. We can sequestrate carbon, we can reduce it. Emissions of carbon from what I've learned in the last 2 or 3 years, tend to sort of signify inefficiency in a business at times. So, you know, there's an awful long way to go, but I'm fairly sure we'll get there, but it will be driven primarily in the next 5 years by consumer demand.
Okay, thanks. Nicholas.
Yeah, all I'd say is, fortunately, we do live in a democracy, and policymakers in the end have to answer to voters, and therefore consumers are king, because that at the end of the day is what determines everything we do. And so I think the answer is fairly simple. The question is how far you can get ahead of current consumer demand in setting policies that will actually deliver to the long-term needs. And I think that's the difficult part, because once you start doing that, unless government supports those demands, then the cost falls on the producer because they can't get it out of the marketplace. So that's the dilemma I think we face at this moment in time.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Just to tweak it a little bit for you, just to make it a bit more challenging for you. What's the single biggest thing that the industry needs to do to meet these demands that are coming from consumers, bankers, policymakers? What's the first step that we need to do on the road to really addressing this situation?
I wish it was as simple to answer as you ask it. I think we're on the way now, aren't we? We are on the way. You know, carbon probably wouldn't have been in any of our vocabularies 10 years ago. Net zero. You know, a lot of the milk buyers are now actually asking for, you know, the carbon footprints and working with their farmers to get those. I think, you know, the industry it's having this debate. You know, as I said earlier, you know, the roadmap has existed for 10 years. Probably some farmers have never heard of it, but it's there, it exists, it shows we've been on a journey. Now, I also spoke about the Dairy Sustainability Framework, which is a global framework. Now, we are better than we think we are in reality, that, you know, but actually we've got to be able to stand up to our customers and say, this is where we are, this is where we're going, and this is where the rest of the world is. Because we will have other countries who want to import and access our markets. And we need to be able to stand up, you know, if the environment and welfare and everything else is important, we believe it is with our consumers, we need to give them the evidence that makes them pick our product up off the shelf. And I think that's the message we need to get back to the farmers, is that this is about, you know, the relationship with the customer. Ultimately, this is what the customer wants. And quite often it's about managing your resources more efficiently. So actually it helps the bottom line on your farm. It's not all about cost.
Okay, thank you, Michael. That's, yeah, I agree with what you're saying there. That's spot on. We've got about a minute left or so. So Sarah Peacock has asked, and if I could ask the panel members to go through this reasonably quickly, what 3 things do the panel feel have to happen within the dairy sector to make it more bulletproof for the future? Oliver.
Excellent. The bane of Zoom meetings, Peter. Somebody's just walked to the door with a parcel, so my son's Labrador is probably about to explode into barking. Apologies if it does. I shall discipline it later with a treat of some sort. What 3 things does the dairy industry need to do? So probably sort of sit up and look forward, as Michael's just said. You know, 10 years ago, carbon what? You know, that was something that was in a pencil, wasn't it? So we are on that journey. I think I would clarify something somebody said. Somebody else said earlier, you know, there is no pressure from the banking sector on farmers at the minute about their carbon footprint, but I can only speak for us. It's a journey we're incredibly keen to be involved with and help with. So point 1, I'll stop waffling, Peter. Point 1, just be aware to the change that's coming on. Point 2, personally, numbers and benchmark geek I was doing, I'd be benchmarking for all I was worth at the minute to make sure my business was the most efficient that it could be. And I think point 3, you know, we do need to get those messages out there about dairy products and the positive things that we're doing, because, you know, we've already talked about consumers making their choices. It alarms me when I have conversations with people I know who are not in the agricultural industry, including my daughter Tim as well, who's at uni as well at the minute, about the sort of myths that are out there, that what farmers get up to in the, you know, hidden behind their farm gate. It's just not true. We need to be more positive, and as Michael said, not head-on aggressive. It just needs to be a really positive experience for people to say, hey, actually, it's not everything you read in the papers or see on a documentary.
Thanks, Oliver. Tim, 3 very quick points, please.
Yeah, well, I'm a civil servant and I wouldn't limit it to 3. I'd have a great big long list of things that we should all be doing. But if Sarah did insist on 3, I think the first one is something around the innovation. And I'm particularly struck with what Michael says about what the industry needs to do, be more imaginative, be more, where are those innovative products on the shelves? Well, what are the blockers? Why isn't that happening at the moment? What needs to happen? So there's something about innovation. The second one is something we haven't touched on, but it's probably about collaboration, where I feel that we've touched on Southern Hemisphere, could mention some other countries close to home, where there's more of a collaborative feel about how the industry works. And so I think there's something there. And thirdly, I would say something about kind of attitude, really. Again, from my fairly limited knowledge, but plenty of contact with New Zealand, Denmark, other big dairy producing countries. There's something about them being net exporters, which gives them a much sharper focus on who they're producing for, where the milk is going, and that entrepreneurial spirit that enables them to get there. But so that there would be my 3 things.
Okay, thanks. Nicholas, very quickly, please.
Yeah, Peter, I'm just going to repackage everything everybody said. I think number one for me is actually business and farm skills. I think that Oliver's point about benchmarking, absolutely critical, but understanding what really does make up your profit. I think there are too many farmers out there who just do not understand. So I think benchmarking for me is critical. Business skills is critical. That's something you do at home. The second thing is that we need to present ourselves to the marketplace collectively, with evidence and reputation, but that does mean we have to actually live up to that reputation. So we actually have to deliver to what we're claiming. And the third is developing markets in collaboration, and that's both the home market and export. Going back to your point, Jim, about attitude, it's culture, isn't it? We've got very comfortable in thinking the UK home market will look after us. It won't. We've actually got to think in terms of new product development, dealing with import substitution, but looking at the big wide open market out there in the world.
Thanks, Nicholas. Michael, in sort of 10 or 15 words, if you could.
Obviously, collaboration within the supply chain would be one, and that embraces lots of things. The right fiscal policies, the right signals from government for on-farm efficiency, and the right environment for our members to have thriving businesses in reality. And everything that all the changes that are coming forward, and help and support where it's needed to get them where they need to be. And then go a point that Nick raised on marketing, both at home and abroad. One issue we haven't spoken about today, which I think should be an opportunity now we've come through Brexit, is procurement. So that is also an opportunity which we haven't spoken about today, but actually that collaboration on marketing, I said it earlier, look what the Irish do. It's government, it's processors, it's farmers working together to get their product and their people throughout the world to make sure that they get those opportunities. And that actually gives that will put pressure on some of our buyers at home that if we have alternatives. And I think Nick spoke about that earlier.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And I'd just like to thank the panel members today for taking the time and joining us and bringing up some important discussion and answering the questions that have been put forward. So thank you very much to everybody on the panel, and thank you to Barclays as well for sponsoring this session. Without our sponsors, none of this would be possible.